Well, we are now in peak season for severe weather across the U.S., but there are growing fears this morning that cuts to the National Weather Service and NOAA are putting more lives in danger. Just recently, NOAA announced it will stop tracking the cost of weather disasters, including floods, heat waves, wildfires, and more.
The cuts could lead to fewer forecasters watching the skies. NBC News meteorologist Chris Mulcahy has the story.
Right at dinner time on April 17th,
we have a tornado warning issued for Pottawatomie County.
Supercell storms started producing tornadoes across eastern Nebraska.
I was really scared last night.
Our Omaha affiliate reporting homes and cars badly damaged, windows blown out, roofs ripped off, one family caught off guard.
We didn't think anything of it, and then my wife started screaming at me, so we hightailed it to the basement, and it was about 20 seconds after I got down there that it ripped through.
Luckily, everyone survived, but with only seconds to spare, is it possible they could have gotten an earlier warning? What we do know from an official bulletin is that the Omaha National Weather Service office didn't have enough staff to launch regular weather balloons that day. Only one instead of two, which meant their data was hours old and only showed the threat of hail, not tornadoes.
And that's impossible to forecast when and where. Not having that data could have saved a life or created a warning that had greater lead time. But if you do it over and over and over again, I can promise you that not having that data is going to be a problem when it comes to forecasting.
And it's all because of a political tornado. DOGE federal employee buyouts and cuts earlier this year, leading to that, quote, lack of office staffing. And now in a rare move, every living former director of the National Weather Service, dating back to President Reagan, is warning that President Trump's proposal to cut NOAA funding by nearly 30% will lead to a, quote, needless loss of life. We reached out to the White House, and a Commerce spokesperson said, in part, NOAA does not anticipate any disruptions in services as a result of staff reorganizations, and the NWS will continue to meet its mission of ensuring public safety amid critical weather events. But a former NWS director disagrees.
We are generating kind of a Swiss cheese weather service. We have holes throughout the weather service now that are not well thought out.
Republican Congressman Mike Flood represents the area hit by those 6 tornadoes on April 17th with a short-staffed weather office. So he called the White House to get more meteorologists to Omaha.
For decades, the National Weather Service personnel have not been classified as public safety. They are clearly public safety, and that's something that we need to do in Congress.
The last NOAA administrator, Rick Spinrad, also tallied that so far, staff cuts have cost the Weather Service 7,000 years of collective experience.
It's like having incoming missiles and not being able to tell anyone when they're coming or where they're coming.
A NOAA spokesperson told NBC News work is underway to restore services at local forecast offices around the country.
There are things in NOAA that I'm sure could be improved, but you don't do that improvement with a hatchet and just randomly cut large chunks. Weather in this nation should not be a political issue.
Yeah, he mentions not do it with a hatchet. Many will say things like this should be done with a scalpel.
Yes.
For precision.
Definitely.
Because, as they point out, people's lives can be at risk.
And I have to say that this has probably been my worst spring forecasting. And the reason why is a couple of reasons. Number one, they cut the rent for a lot of data centers. So the ones that we use, they're updated, are changing hourly. So they're not consistent. This is the least consistency that I've had so far.
Right.
And then just all in all, in general, there's times I've reached out to our National Weather Service offices and I've heard of Blacksburg, Virginia, covering for GSP. So it's the lack of details there. The Storm Prediction Center, I think, is the lack of time. They're kind of doing like a cover their own A type of mentality just because they want to say, well, we're going to put them into a low risk just in case. So I think it's less accuracy that we've had on the umbrella.
Right.
And my biggest concern here is going forward, every single year we have the $1 billion disasters claimed. This year's hurricanes are not going to make the list. So we're not going to be able to say Helene was the 7th costliest because the funding that came from this division that you're going to see in a graphic here is going to be expunged. Maybe you have a third tier that's going to look at this, but this is how we compare our different hurricanes. This is how insurance brokers are going to be able to claim certain areas. There's going to be big gaps in coverage. There's going to be certain areas that are going to be more in flood-prone areas that aren't covered just because they don't have the data. They don't know how costly these are. So a lot of the research that's done for climate, how things are changed, are not happening in 2025. So that's disappointing that this list that I'm making right here, I'm not going to have from the NCEI, that's environmental information, in 2025.
And what do we, and if you don't know the answer, that's fine, but what do we gain from not keeping track of it? Like, is it a money-saving thing?
It's a money-saving thing.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah, because and at this point, and there's external sources, and I really don't want to get myself in trouble here, is that essentially you took out the main keys that were showing that the climate is changing.
So it's making sort of what you do, I guess, more difficult. You can do your own forecasting, but it's helpful if you have this data to kind of help with your research for forecasting.
Well, and also, like, in general, like Helene, you see on this list, is the 7th costliest hurricane on record, and this is based on the 2024 Consumer Price Index, so it changes every year with inflation and things like that.
Right.
I don't have an updated 2025 list to see how these numbers are changing. And whatever storms that we have on here, I'm not going to be able to accurately measure how the storms this year compared to others. So 2025 is going to seem like not a bad year, even on paper, because we don't have these numbers associated with the storm.
I see.
We don't have that type of research data. So on the surface, you're like, well, it doesn't really matter. It's just after the fact in the storm. It's like, no, all this in general is research that improves our forecasting ability and insurance for areas and protection for areas going forward.
Because you see the severity of what happened with the past storm.
No, exactly. So it's one of those things, you might just think it's numbers, it might be just like a fancy fact, but it's a big gap in coverage. So I'm hoping that changes, but for right now, that's kind of an example. I'm hoping that we have no big hurricanes, so we don't have to worry about it, but c'est la vie, that's the way it is. We move on.